Hey everyone, before you listen to the podcast, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network. You're listening to the Better Live Than Dead podcast on the Gear Radio Network.
And with that, we welcome you to Better Live Than Dead, the podcast, episode number 162.
162. I'm digging it.
All that added together adds up to 9. I don't know why that's relevant, but it is. This is the NFL Wildcard Weekend Cast, powered by Better Live Than Dead and the Gear Radio Network. I am Ryan Wolfe at Wolfe BLTD. Joining me on the IndyCard Media Hotline, Mr. Perez at MRLG Perez. And before we get started, I want to let you know you can hear us on BetterLiveThanDead.com, Apple Podcasts, Bullhorn, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Pandora, the Radio.com app, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you can listen to podcasts. Lewis, how you doing?
Hey, man. You know, I'm okay. I'm going through a series of some health issues right now. I got some tonsillitis, strep throat, something going on with my ears. It's kind of ridiculous. Other than that, I'm okay. How are you, bro? How are you?
You sound great. You sound like you're doing great. I'm okay. I'm doing good. I'm hanging in there. It's the first full work week back after that weird holiday stretch where we had 2 vacation days on a Wednesday back to back.
Right.
I was exhausted, but I'm back in the saddle again. It's Wednesday now. My autographed Blake Bortles mini helmet showed up in the mail, so I am on cloud 9 today.
Awesome. Nothing wrong with that.
For the record, I drank 6 beers last weekend and somehow thought for a good idea would be, or I thought it would be a good idea to spend $30 and buy an autographed Blake Bortles Jaguars mini helmet. But,
hey, listen,
you know,
I've heard of people spending a lot more when they've had, you know, some alcohol in their system. So $30 isn't bad.
I mean, before that, the last drunken purchase I made was a hammock. So I would like to think that I am 2 for my last 2.
Yeah, that's not a bad purchase either.
We're all winners in the long run, but
I know a guy that once bought a $10,000 watch while he was drunk.
That's stupid.
Yes.
That's very stupid.
Fortunately, he had the loot to cover it, and it was a nice watch.
Good for him, but I wouldn't do it.
No, me neither.
Well, hey, with that being said, Lewis, what a wild card weekend it was. Jumping into our 3 big things brought to you by FortunePhoto.com. First off, we're going to go back and we're going to look at Wild Card Weekend because there were 4 games, and I'll be damned if they weren't all interesting in their own way, shape, or form. First off, we're going to start off with Houston. They defeated Buffalo 22-19 in overtime. What an insane game. With the way it started, how Buffalo came out hot, up 16-0, allowing 19 unanswered points, tying it with 5 seconds to go, having multiple opportunities to win in overtime. And then you get that missed sack on the second to last play where 2 Buffalo defenders had Deshaun Watson dead to rights. He spins out like the crazy wizard he is, gets the ball dumped off, runs downfield to set up the game-winning field goal. But Lewis, that game will go down as an instant classic if it already hasn't.
Yeah, to be up 16-0 and then to lose 22-19 is kind of crazy. I, unfortunately, did not watch the game. Me and my wife had a date night, so we went to a movie. And then after the movie, we went and had a lovely dinner. However, I will say during dinner, both her and I had our phones out and was monitoring the game, so we knew what was going on. And then, of course, I saw highlights afterwards. But yeah, absolutely banana crackers. Buffalo, I believe, the next season or 2 will be, you know, a championship caliber team. They just a couple pieces, but this was a good game for them.
We talked about it on Trust the Podcast too with myself and John, where you know we think the Buffalo Bills at least need to go out and get a number 1 wide receiver. I mean, the offense seemed to be fine, but it still seems like it's missing that one game-changing wide receiver. I mean, Josh Allen could have made a couple better decisions. We know that Sean McDermott said flat out after the game and in the season-ending press conference, I should say, he said that Josh Allen tried to do too much, but it's almost like he's young. He's still
young.
Learning. His
Right.
decision making has got to get a little better, but if you give him those weapons, I think he'll improve.
Everything that you just said was pretty much verbatim what I was about to say, so I 100% agree with you.
Sorry from taking that.
Don't apologize. That's
well, hey, you know what? You know what else?
There.
It's not only do I think that they need to get those pieces in there, but worst case scenario, right? Josh Allen's not the guy. You'll still have all these pieces in an offense, and you'll just need to get a quarterback. So keep building that offense. The defense, you can maintain it. It's good enough where you can. It's really good where you can keep that going. And then from there, if Josh Allen's the guy, great. If he's not, at least you'll have some pieces to put around him. So you won't be putting all your eggs in one basket, which I think that at this point, Brandon Beane's kind of alluded to it. He already said that this wide receiver class is really good. It might be a smokescreen, but it also could be Brandon Beane telegraphing his first round pick, which if he gets a wide receiver, there are a few out there that are very good that would immediately step in and help the Buffalo Bills offense out. I know we talked about T. Higgins in general from Clemson on Trust the Podcast. That would be a nice addition to the Bills offense. But either way, I think that they realize who they have to replace, what they have to do to make that next step. And I think next year, honestly, the team goes from making the playoffs is not enough. Winning a playoff game is probably where the expectations roll to, if not the East, with how bad the Patriots looked, which we'll talk about here in just a second.
No, absolutely. I agree. They definitely need a number one wide receiver. Like you said, like the coach said, Josh Allen tried to do too much. He's still, like you said already, he's young. Young quarterbacks make mistakes. They try to do too much. And so hopefully this will be something that he can learn from and improve going forward. I think it's, a good thing for upstate New York when this team is good. We all know my feeling on the Bills. I can't stand them. I like when they lose. However, I have a lot of friends, including, you who are fans and people who jump on the bandwagon, so to speak, when they're doing well, not as like their favorite team, but to root for. And I get it. I understand why people do that. I'm not one of them because, like I said, I like them. But it'll be exciting when they actually do finally reach that next level. And heaven forbid the day that they actually win a Super Bowl, upstate New York will probably burn.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that at all. I want to ask you now, speaking of the AFC East, speaking of losing, Tennessee pulls off a major upset, defeats the New England Patriots 20-13. Tennessee running back Derrick Henry, 34 carries for 182 yards and a touchdown. Derrick Henry is he's like end of the season. He plays his best football, and it happened last year. It's happening this year. Now, Lewis, New England quarterback Tom Brady's headed to unrestricted free agency for the first time ever. He said he still feels like he has something to prove. Is this the end of the New England dynasty? Do you see Tom Brady walking away? It doesn't look like Bill Belichick's going anywhere, but do you think Tom Brady could potentially be in a different uniform next season?
I don't see that happening. I don't think that'd be a good look, how Tom Brady wants to end his career. The one thing we have to realize about the New England Patriots is that, sure, they look terrible. They had a lot of injuries, though. So they were not playing at 100% capacity. If some of those pieces come back healthy and Tom Brady can still sling the ball, I can see him being signed to maybe some type of, 1 year contract and coming back and trying to ride off into the sunset with another ring. He's still dangerous. He didn't look great this season. However, his stats don't bear that out. He still had an awesome season while not quite looking Tom Brady-esque. So I can see him coming back. I would hate for him to go to another team and just kind of ruin his legacy, so to speak, because we've seen that time and time again. So hopefully that doesn't happen.
I absolutely agree. I mean, we've heard some rumors about maybe he'll go to the Indianapolis Colts. Maybe he'll go to the Los Angeles Chargers. But I mean, I think at this point, no matter where he goes, I know he wasn't really one for helping guys like Jimmy Garoppolo out, for instance, but maybe he'll realize that his legacy now may not be so much on the field as it is off the field, in the locker room, in the film room, helping develop the next future, insert team name here, quarterback. Because, I mean, aside from Tom Brady, the Patriots don't really have an answer at quarterback for the future after Tom Brady. And that's, I mean, it's not looking good for the Patriots. I know I don't want to write them off, because every time I feel like we write them off, they're like the Undertaker,
right.
The bell dings, he sits up and you're like, oh my God, this person just does not die.
Right.
But with how ineffective the Patriots looked after they started 8-0, and you wondered to yourself, man, how did this happen? They're good, but they're not great. And
right.
then the cracks started to show. Then they became bigger cracks. And then Tennessee just ground them down in that wild card playoff game, and good for them, because I mean, it's crazy that potentially Tom Brady's final game in New England, he loses to ex-teammate Mike Vrabel. That's pretty interesting for sure. So a lot of storylines coming out of that game. A lot of things we'll watch in the offseason. I mean, right now it's been kind of radio silence aside from Brady putting that Instagram post up. He says he doesn't think he's going to retire, whatever that may be. And maybe he'll get forced into retirement, where they say, we're not bringing you back. If you want to end in New England, you got to retire now. But I can't see something like that happening either. So either way, like I said, we'll keep up on that.
Frankly, what they need to do is they need to sit him down and they say, listen, you're 41, 42 years old. We're going to draft a quarterback, a great quarterback that we could find coming out of college, or at least, a serviceable quarterback. And then next season, while playing, you're going to mentor this quarterback and show them what we expect as an organization. You haven't done that before. Now's your time to correct those issues and do it this time, and see if he jumps on board. Frankly, he'd be stupid not to, but lots of great quarterbacks have done that. Peyton Manning did the same thing. Peyton Manning was known to not want to mentor the next quarterback, which is stupid.
I mean, it's not necessarily part of your job description, but some people just don't. They're not natural born teachers. But then again, I feel like even if you're around Tom Brady, or Peyton Manning or something like that, you can watch them and mirror your game after them and learn a lot. But again, I've never been in the situation, but that would be my best guess, at least.
Yeah, no, you absolutely can. However, actually having the individual teach you by themselves, or sit you down and say, this is what I do, this is how I pregame, this is the stuff I look for when I'm watching video, that could help quite a bit. And he's not known to do that. Well, like you said, we saw it with Garoppolo. I mean, they had a chance to have their backup, possibly future, and Brady wasn't having it.
Absolutely.
These people think they're going to play forever, and it's just not the case.
Well, so far Brady has, but we'll see how that turns out. Like I said, we'll keep an eye on it this offseason, and we'll keep you abreast of the latest news, and we'll break it down here on the Better Live Than Dead podcast. Now, moving over to the NFC, Minnesota defeats New Orleans 26-20 in overtime. Lewis, Minnesota quarterback Kirk Cousins finally wins the big one. That's always been his knock. He plays fine in the regular season, comes to the postseason, crumbles, but he held his own last weekend and gets Minnesota to at least a divisional round, where they have a tough opponent, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But like I said, Lewis, Kirk Cousins finally does a damn thing, and Minnesota can rejoice.
Yeah, no, that's great for Kirk Cousins. I honestly thought the Saints were going to win. However, I was wrong. And my original pick for the Super Bowl this year is still there. I still don't think they're going to get there, but good for Kirk Cousins. I mean, he finally won himself a playoff game. Drew Brees was held down a little bit. The defense did a very good job keeping Drew Brees from being Drew Brees. Good for
to
them.
mention real quick, because I have it written down here, so I'll just throw it in there. Minnesota's defense held New Orleans quarterback Drew Brees to 26 of 33 passing, 208 yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. Lewis, I almost said they corrupted him. They definitely interrupted his flow, and it's almost like Minnesota made New Orleans play their game and not vice versa. And that defense looked really good against the Saints. And like I said, they're going to need it to show up again this weekend for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you.
Now, there was a controversial game-winning touchdown where both New Orleans cornerback P.J. Williams and Minnesota tight end Kyle Rudolph were pushing off of each other. They said, they being NFL senior VP of officiating Al Riveron, said, quote, all angles of the final play of the Minnesota versus New Orleans game were looked at in New York. There is contact by both players, but none of that contact rises to the level of a foul, which pissed off a lot of Saints fans because they've been burned on some bad calls. But honestly, end of the day, probably let that one go because, again, it was not coming from one side. It was coming from both sides. And there's really, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to call it on both of them and make them replay the down or whatever it may be. So like I said, just let it go. And I think the NFL needs to change their overtime rules at some point in time again to allow both teams to get a possession, no matter a touchdown or a field goal.
I agree.
I think that's probably in the pipeline. It has to be at some point in time, especially now because you figure the Saints will be like, well, hey, we got the pass interference rule passed. Let's try the overtime rule now. But we'll see what happens. Again, it's one of those offseason topics we'll probably discuss ad nauseum, especially if it happens again in a more important game than that wild card matchup. But we will certainly we're keeping tabs on all these news stories for you guys so we can talk about them and get your reaction, get our reaction. Now, the last game of the weekend kind of got snubbed a little. Seattle defeats Philadelphia 17-9. Seattle quarterback Russell Wilson was incredible. 18 of 30, 325 yards, 1 touchdown with 9 rushes for 45 yards. Well, mentioning being snubbed of a great game, Philadelphia quarterback Carson Wentz left with a concussion in the first quarter after what appeared to be a nasty hit. Philadelphia quarterback Josh McCown, 18 for 24, 174 yards in relief. Lewis, I'm not sure about you. I have a newfound respect for Josh McCown, a 40-year-old quarterback making his first playoff appearance in his career, played his ass off, and really gave it all that he had in likely what is going to be his final game of his career.
He did. He stepped up and he did a great job. Seattle was obviously the better team that day. I saw the hit on Wentz. A lot of people were saying it was a dirty hit. I got to be honest with you. They were both falling in the same direction. I didn't really think it was a dirty hit. But yeah, good for Josh McCown. It'll be shame, it'll be a shame to see him ride off like that. But hey, at least he got a chance to play in the playoffs. Yeah.
And like I said, newfound respect for that guy because there's a definition of leaving it all out there, and he definitely did that on Sunday.
Absolutely.
Now moving on to our second of the 3 big things this week, news around the NFL. First off, the NFL draft, Alabama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa and University of Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm among the players who will enter the 2020 NFL draft. Los Angeles Rams announced defensive coordinator Wade Phillips will not return as defensive coordinator next season. Dallas, they finally choose not to renew Jason Garrett's contract, which I'll ask you about in just a second here, Lewis. But they hire ex-Green Bay head coach Mike McCarthy to a 5-year deal as a head coach. Saints linebacker coach Mike Nolan, the ex-49ers head coach, hired as a defensive coordinator. Rams special teams coordinator John Fassel hired as the special teams coordinator for the Cowboys. Washington defensive line coach Jim Tom Sula, ex-49ers head coach as well, hired as the defensive line coach. Dallas offensive coordinator Kellen Moore will return to the coaching staff, I believe, in the same position. Also, just breaking before the podcast, Dallas will hire Joe Philbin as offensive line coach and assistant head coach, formerly of the Miami Dolphins, and he also was the Green Bay Packers. I believe he was an assistant coach as well as the interim head coach when Mike McCarthy was fired. He's been out of football since the end of 2018 after being let go after he was the interim head coach. So, Lewis, starting at the top, first off, how pathetic is it that the Dallas Cowboys didn't want to get Jason Garrett all boo-boo faced, so they didn't fire him. I don't know if they didn't fire him or he wouldn't let them fire him, but his contract is up January 14th. So they just chose not to renew his contract. How big of a bitch move is that?
It's a pretty big one. I mean, listen, I get it.
Real quick. Sorry, Lewis. I have to also just put this in there before you give me your thoughts here, because it's one more little fact I forgot to mention.
Okay.
Not only is it a gigantic bitch move, but apparently the New York Giants wanted to talk to Jason Garrett reportedly about their offensive coordinator position, but they would have to ask for permission because Jason Garrett is still under contract with the Dallas Cowboys for one more week. Come on.
Right. I mean,
like breaking up with your girlfriend but not changing your Facebook status, bro. Like, get over it. It's over. Move on.
I can see Dallas doing that for two reasons. One, to prevent people from moving in on him as quickly as possible, which obviously the Giants was going to want to interview him. And two, he's been with the organization for a long time. And so I can see Jerry not wanting to give him the sting of being fired, although frankly, I think just letting the contract expire is worse. So yeah, I think it was I agree with you. It was a bitch move.
At the end of the day, you're not good enough. Thank you. Next.
Right. Exactly. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming. You did absolutely nothing for the organization.
And wasted the prime of a lot of good football players.
Absolutely. 100%.
So now that they bring Mike McCarthy in, who is a noted Super Bowl champion, he's worked with Aaron Rodgers for a very long time. He's bringing in what appears to be a super staff of very talented coaches to work with this team. Where do you think Dallas goes from here? I mean, we obviously know that there's probably no way Dak Prescott leaves, whether or not they franchise tag him or sign him to a long-term deal.
Right.
I mean, Amari Cooper's a free agent. They've got a couple of big free agents on defense, but what's next, do you think, for the Dallas Cowboys?
They need to bring Cooper back. I believe he's a good fit. He's obviously an excellent wide receiver. They need to shore up the defense. Honestly, what they need to do is they've talked about their front line for so long, and for a while, that front line was incredible, and it's still good, but those people are getting old, so they need to look at shoring up their front line again. I believe there's several pieces they need to put in place to make this a championship caliber team. I believe they're super close where they're at. Mike McCarthy has won a Super Bowl. He knows what it takes to get to the Super Bowl and win one, something that Jason Garrett was never able to do, not even able to advance in the playoffs. So he already has a leg up on Jason Garrett. He's put together what looks to be an excellent staff. So if they can sign the people they need to sign, I can see this being a much better team. Or I can see them playing up to the potential that they should have played up to this past season.
I think honestly that it could be a quick turnaround for the Dallas Cowboys. I think that Amari Cooper probably ends up going somewhere else just because there will be a team out there that is desperate for a number one wide receiver that will probably throw bags of money at him.
Right.
But I almost wonder if Dallas, because right now, if there's not a new CBA ratified, I believe you'll be able to use the franchise tag and the transition tag this year. So I would have to presume that at worst case, they franchise Dak Prescott and they transition tag Amari Cooper. I'd have to double check that to make sure, but I feel like I read that somewhere. So that way it would at least give Dallas the right of first refusal when it comes to Amari Cooper. But again, Dallas is going to be a very interesting case study because they're keeping Kellen Moore. He seemed to be a very good offensive mind for the Cowboys last season. It seems like him and Mike McCarthy will work very well in conjunction with each other, despite the fact that Mike McCarthy will likely be calling the plays offensively. We'll see how everything shakes out. But yeah, I'm especially interested to see what happens with Dak Prescott, with I think Byron Jones is a free agent, Amari Cooper, like we had mentioned, a lot of big names in Dallas that could potentially be swapping teams. And it's something, again, I've said it again, it's the theme of the podcast. We're gonna keep tabs on it. We'll keep you posted, and we'll talk about it more throughout the offseason as it is relevant to the news. Now, looking over at Carolina, they also hire a new head coach. They hire Baylor's head coach, Matt Rule, as their new head coach. Rule had been linked to the New York Giants head coaching job for some time now. Rule was a former assistant offensive line coach for the Giants in 2012. Apparently made a very big impression on them with his ability to handle his players and his job responsibilities and all that. He took Baylor from 1-11 in 2017 to 11-3 in 2019. Now, Rule signed a 6-year, $70 million deal. He reportedly called the Giants to offer them to match that deal before accepting Carolina's deal. The Giants reportedly refused a match, which Rule then was said to have canceled the interview with the Giants and accepted the Carolina deal. And with that being said, too, the Giants had themselves a candidate that they were hot about, which turns out to be New England Patriot wide receiver coach Joe Judge, who is now their head coach. He interviewed Monday with the Giants. It is his first head coaching job ever. He has been with New England since 2012 as a special teams assistant, was promoted to special teams coordinator, then added the wide receiver coach job to his responsibilities. Also, they say he reportedly crushed the interview with the Giants and received, quote, a sterling recommendation from New England head coach Bill Belichick. So good on Matt Rule for his massive contract, and good on Joe Judge for taking an opportunity and making getting an NFL head coaching job out of it.
Yeah, I mean, 6 years, $70 million. It's not a bad deal for a head coach. But
not to mention too, Carolina paid Baylor $6 million to be able to bring him to the Carolina Panthers. So you can tell how serious David Tepper and the Carolina Panthers were about signing Matt Rule as their new head coach.
Absolutely, but the real question is, you're missing the most important aspect of all these hirings.
Who the hell is Joe Judge?
The real question is, did any of them stay at the owner's house before they signed the contract?
I forgot about that. That's real goddamn creepy. That's next level horror movie stuff right there.
I thought it was a little weird myself.
It is pretty strange, but I guess you got to do what you got to do to get paid, right?
Hey, Jerry's pretty rich. He probably has a pretty nice house.
He probably has such a big house that it's like 7 houses, Yeah,
probably
975 bathrooms or something. I'll look into that while you answer this next question. It's third of the three big things. If I could speak the English language, I'm sure that would help out. We call this one the Listen In Inquiry, a question posed to our sister podcast, Listen In, on the Gear Radio Network by an anonymous listener. Quote, why is it Aaron Rodgers takes all kind of heat for winning one Super Bowl and Drew Brees continues to fail to pick up a second, yet he gets a pass and sympathy? Now, before I let you answer, Lewis, I'll give you these stats here real quick. In 174 career starts, Aaron Rodgers is 113-60-1. He's 9-7 in 16 career playoff starts, 1-0 in the Super Bowl. That was in 2010. Drew Brees, 163-111 in 274 career starts. So he has 50 more wins and 100 more starts. Drew Brees is 8-8 in 16 career playoff starts, 1-0 in the Super Bowl. That is in 2009. So again, why does Aaron Rodgers take all kind of heat for only winning one Super Bowl, but Drew Brees, who has done the same, continues to fail to get his second, but is lauded for his efforts?
I think the answer is multi-layered, and I think it has to do with the fact that New Orleans had a huge catastrophe, and Drew Brees was there. Throughout the catastrophe, helping people. He was the face, basically, of the team while they were letting people stay in the Superdome or the Mercedes-Benz Dome or whatever it's called now. He was an active participant in helping that city out. So I think people see that and they're like, oh, Drew Brees is a nice guy. And then if you watch like commercials, you see Drew Brees in a bunch of commercials now, and you see Aaron Rodgers in a bunch of commercials. And if you just watch like the body language and the acting and all that, Drew Brees comes across as a likable guy. Aaron Rodgers comes across kind of as a tool. I think that if you just look at the two and listen to them speak, in interviews and press conferences, and Aaron Rodgers just seems like like a jerk. He just seems like someone I wouldn't want to hang out with. And Drew Brees has never grown a porn stash, creepy mustache like Aaron Rodgers did. So I think Drew Brees gets the pass because he just seems like he's a nice guy.
I mean, I would agree that, and that's the one thing John mentioned to me too, is people think he's more personable. Yeah. I get that. I know Aaron Rodgers, it comes off as more of, he might not be the company man, he might not toe the line, but I still think he's an incredible quarterback, one of the greatest we've ever seen.
He is an incredible quarterback.
I just think, like you said, I think it might be the personable factor, the personality factor, because I don't mind Aaron Rodgers. I think that his call it as it lies type of personality, I don't have a problem with it. I know some people might, but whatever, they can get over. But I certainly think that you're onto something with your response there.
Well, yeah, but he seems standoffish, while Drew Brees does not. So
for sure,
I think that has a lot to do with it.
Now, just to update you really quick on Jerry Jones' house.
I'm just going to throw this in real quick.
Oh, sorry.
I feel like, as someone who comes from a background as a bouncer and a private bodyguard, I feel like if Drew Brees and his friends were out at a bar having some drinks and something was to happen, Drew Brees would be an individual that would make sure that everybody was okay and trying to de-escalate the situation that was caused by Aaron Rodgers. Like that's how they both strike me. Like, if they're out at a bar, Aaron Rodgers is going to cause some issues because he's a jerk, and Drew Brees will try to de-escalate it.
If I hung out with Aaron Rodgers, I would do the discount double check
all day, and then he'd probably get annoyed, and that's why the fight starts.
Also, real quick update on Jerry Jones' house. As I cut you off, I apologize about that. He has a 14,044 square foot Mediterranean style villa in Highland Park, Dallas, Texas. The 2-story home built in 1931 boasts 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, 6 fireplaces, and even marble flooring. Wow. Okay, so they probably didn't sleep in the same bedroom.
You can fit 14 of my houses in his house.
That's wild. Now, real quick, before we wrap this up, the look ahead, the divisional weekend is upon us. We've got Minnesota versus San Francisco. The line is -7 in San Francisco's favor. Tennessee, Baltimore. Baltimore has the line at -10 right now. Houston, Kansas City. Kansas City has that line also at -10, I believe. Seattle and Green Bay, the line is Green Bay -4. I don't know what any of that means, but I know people out there appreciate that. So I think my prediction, real quick, I'm going to go San Fran, Baltimore, Kansas City, Seattle.
I'm going to go Minnesota, Baltimore, Kansas City, Green Bay.
Fair enough. Either way,
I'd like to see Seattle win.
Either way, we're in for a good week of football, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to already being back next weekend to talk the divisional round and the conference championships.
It'll be fun.
So, with that being said, I started to cut the podcast off so abruptly, but I'm very hungry, and I'm going to go eat dinner because I'm starting to get a little spacey here.
Nothing wrong with that. What are you going to have for dinner?
So that being said, what's that?
What are you going to have for dinner?
I don't know yet. Something. I'll figure it out. I hope it's good because I'm getting real hungry, but I'll figure it out when I go out there, and I'll just look in the freezer and say that's what I want.
Cool.
With that being said, though, Lewis is at MRLG Perez. I am at Wolf BLTD. Like I said, you can hear the podcast anywhere you get podcasts. If not, let us know. With that being said, we are better live than dead.
You are not.
We appreciate you tuning in, Lewis. I appreciate you tuning in this week.
Appreciate you having me.
With that being said, we will catch you sometime very soon.
Peace.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.